Hello, Jakarta and the world. This is White Trash Talking. I'm Doug Johnson, and I'll be talking to you about issues relating to Jakarta, the U.S., and the world. As a U.S. citizen now living in Jakarta, I touch on issues relating to the West and the East, the United States and Indonesia, and to the world events in general, because everything is related and interconnected. Iran launched missiles on Israel a few days ago. The big question now is whether Israel will retaliate against Iran. But that question itself is absurd, and it's important to take a cursory look at the regional history to understand why. Iran has endured repeated attacks from Israel and the U.S. for the last 40 years, ever since the 1979 Iranian Revolution. In the 1950s, Mohammad Mossadegh was the democratically elected Prime Minister of Iran, which then had a secular and progressive government. In a move against the waning British Empire, Mossadegh nationalized the oil industry in an attempt to shake off colonial exploitation and establish national sovereignty. The U.S. took this opportunity to step in and replace the UK's colonial role by fomenting a rebellion inside Iran to remove Mossadegh. At that time, Iran had great admiration for and trust in the United States and was easily deceived by this U.S.-sponsored coup. In place of Mossadegh, the U.S. installed into power the ceremonial and otherwise powerless monarch of Iran, Mohammad Reza, otherwise known as the Shah, who served effectively as dictator. With his new power, backed by the U.S., the Shah of Iran opened his country to American corporations while ruthlessly crushing any dissent by Iranians. Through his secret police, many thousands of Iranians disappeared forever, while public demonstrations were harshly curtailed and numerous massacres ensued. The Shah's reign of terror lasted from 1953 until 1977, at which time the Iranians had had enough. A 2-year popular revolution began until 1979, when Iranian university students stormed the U.S. Embassy in Tehran, captured and held 52 American hostages for 444 days. After the Shah fled in 1979, the students demanded an end to U.S. meddling in their country's affairs and the return of the Shah for a trial. U.S. President Jimmy Carter attempted to rescue the 52 hostages by sending in helicopters, but this ended in disaster as the helicopters crashed into one another upon taking off, killing all of the servicemen aboard. This event likely contributed to Carter failing to get reelected to a second term and Ronald Reagan winning the presidency in 1981, at which time Iran released all of the hostages unharmed. The U.S. has never forgiven Iran for the egregious offense of defying U.S. hegemony. Since 1979, the U.S. has maintained a comprehensive embargo against Iran, which initially devastated their economy. The U.S. supported Saddam Hussein in his 8-year war against Iran, while Israel, acting as U.S.'s proxy, repeatedly attacked Iranians at home and abroad. Those murdered included important Iranian scientists and military leaders. The U.S. also assassinated the beloved military officer Qasem Soleimani through a drone attack as he was leaving the Baghdad airport. Finally, Trump unilaterally withdrew from a nuclear treaty with Iran, although Iran was in full compliance. Through it all, the Iranians remained patient and steadfast. As they became more and more self-sufficient, they slowly built up their manufacturing capacity and found markets in neighboring countries. The Iranians also embarked on a 20-year military program, during which time they built bases and bunkers deep underground and began producing drones and hypersonic missiles that outperform most of what the U.S. or Israel possess. During the periodic attacks by Israel, Iran exercised control and patience, waiting for the day when all the pieces were in place and they could stand their ground against their tormentors. That day came on April 1st, when Israel bombed the Iranian embassy in Lebanon, killing top Iranian diplomats and generals. This unprecedented attack against Iran's sovereign territory violates international law as well as the norms and conventions of warfare, something the Iranians could not leave unanswered. How Iranians responded was masterful and extraordinary. After making the Israelis nervously fidget for a couple of weeks, the Iranians announced to the world that they would launch drones and missiles towards Israel. The Israelis recruited the U.S., UK, France, and Jordan to supplement their vaunted Iron Dome defense system with U.S.-made Patriot missiles and Arrow and David Sling missile interceptors. In addition, the U.S., British, and the Israelis scrambled fighter jets, while the U.S. and France used anti-missile defenses from battleships. According to Scott Ritter, former U.S. weapons inspector, the Iranians first launched their slow-moving drones, followed by cruise and then ballistic missiles. Depending on your news source, the reports of this attack are vastly different. Mainstream news sources in the West claim that 99% of all the missiles were shot down and the defense was a spectacular success. According to Scott Ritter, however, quote, Iranian missiles rained down on Israel and there was nothing Israel could do to stop them, end quote. Ritter adds that around a half dozen missiles hit Israel's military base in the Negev desert, from where the attack on the Iranian embassy originated. He states that all of the drones and many cruise missiles were cheap decoys, which diverted attention away from the higher-speed ballistic missiles. Also important is the fact that the cost of the decoys was several $1 million, while the cost of intercepting them was over $1 billion. The result is that the most protected area on the planet was breached. This means that Iran can hit Israel anywhere, anytime. A new deterrence has just been established and the power dynamics have shifted. We live in a new world. This would explain why Joe Biden let Netanyahu know immediately after Iran's attack that the U.S. would not support Israel if they go to war with Iran. The U.S. military bases throughout the region, in places like Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, Iraq, etc., are all easy targets now for Iran, which has tens of thousands of hypersonic missiles that are superior to any made in the U.S. Soldiers stationed in the Middle East are unprotected, and the U.S. knows it. Israel, which can no longer count on the U.S. to protect it, will have to learn to live peacefully with its neighbors or get destroyed. The U.S. could not get over their hatred of Iran all these years because Iranians dared stand up for themselves. They refused, then and now, to submit to American hegemony. Iran is not perfect by a long shot, but my admiration for the country continues to grow. I'm Doug Johnson. This is White Trash Talking. Please give me a like. Drop a comment if you feel like it. Thank you for listening.